Hello. Hello, Two Harbors. Well, that's a nice start. I love that. What a great room. Hi, everybody. I'm Kitty Mayo with the Lake County Press. I know Roger and Grant and Natalie are making their way up. Good. We're going to start here in a minute. I want to tell you some ground rules that we're starting with. Civility is going to be the rule of this group. And I know, yes, thank you. Let's hear that. Along with the idea of civility is not the idea that you can't express your ideas, your opinions, things that you disagree about. That's how we have healthy conversations. That's what the Lake County Press is about. Being able to say what you think to people in a public way requires a certain amount of civility. So having respect in the way you phrase your questions and the way you react to them. There's lots of protests going on all over in the area today, and I hope you got to get your cheers on and your jeers on or whatever it was that you were doing out there. I think there's more opportunities coming. But for here, let's talk about what our common goals are, what our challenges are, where we disagree, and what the other people who don't agree with us think about it. Let's talk it out. Let's be looking for solutions. Can we do that? What do you think, you guys? I think so too. So I want to start with a little story, because maybe most of you don't know this. Natalie's office contacted me and said, we have this great idea for Roger and Natalie and Grant to come together, Democrats and Republicans, and find out what you guys are thinking who voted them into office. Republicans and Democrats together. Who likes that idea? Yeah, I do too, a lot. So thank you to all of you for being here and being willing to have these conversations. I hope they're lively and exciting, and I'm ready to get started. I'm going to take 1 second to get down to the bottom of the stage, and what we're going to do is, some people have sent me in a few questions. Katya's getting organized, excuse me, outside the door. A lot of you wrote down questions with your name on it, and she's sorting them right now furiously, putting them into categories. Oh, there she is. She's sorting them over here furiously with her headlamp on. Put them into categories, seeing if there's any that are the same questions, so we can get through as many questions as quickly as we can with robust answers from our elected officials, okay? So give me a second and we'll start rolling. 2 seconds. I'm going to start by saying, why don't you guys do an introduction statement each. We'll start over here with Roger. You just want to talk about yourself for 2 seconds, and we'll just whip across the stage.
Not really, but hi, I'm Roger Skraba. I'm from Ely, Minnesota. I'm your state representative for all of Lake County, but Two Harbors. I've been in office since 2022, and it's been a pleasure serving. I was the mayor of Ely for a bunch of years and city councilor, and sat on planning commission, St. Louis County Planning Commission, the chair for many years. So I understand a lot of the issues coming before us and that have been in the Capitol. So look forward to a robust discussion this afternoon.
I'm Representative Natalie, I think it's on. Is it on?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm Representative Natalie Zeleznikar. I represent Proctor, Hermantown, Rice Lake, Gary New Duluth, Two Harbors, and 14 townships, and I live in one of the townships in Friedenberg. And I'm happy to be back here. I worked in Two Harbors 30 years ago when it was Sunrise Nursing Home. So I did not have any public service experience. I just have worked for 40 years, and I bring that experience to the table, and I'm honored to serve 44,000 people that live in my district and trying to make the North a great place for everybody. So thank you.
Well, hello? There we go. Yep. Thanks, everybody, for being here. I'm Grant Hauschild, your state senator. I live in Hermantown, and I was a city councilor before being elected. I also have experience working at the federal level in the U.S. Senate and at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. I've always focused on rural policy and rural issues most of my life, and I'm a young father. My daughter Isla and son Henry are here in the audience with me on a little field trip today with Dad for work. So I'm just so grateful you all are here. I think last time we did this, Kitty, we probably had half as many people here, so it's really awesome to see more people here, more engagement, and I'm excited for the discussion. Thanks so much.
Thank you for those introductions. We have a lot of stuff to talk about. I don't have to tell you that. Let's just dive right into talking about the governor's budget, Minnesota budget, specifically the cost shift to counties. And I'm going to pose this to all three of you, and I think there's some explaining to be done. It's complicated, right? And this comes from a reader of the Lake County Press. His name is Rich. I bet you can guess which one that is. He couldn't make it here today. The proposed cuts to PILT, payment in lieu of taxes, which impacts northern counties disproportionately due to our large amount of public lands. These proposed cuts and cost shifts to Lake County could produce a substantial levy increase just to maintain the current services provided by the county. I know, Grant, you spoke to this recently, testifying before the Senate Tax Committee. I'm going to throw this to you first. Tax increases would be expected to increase by over 30% with the proposed state budget cuts to PILT. Can you go first, Grant, please?
Sorry, this mic's a little weird. Thanks, everybody, again. So payment in lieu of taxes is something that's really, really fundamentally important to our region. And the reason is because we have a lot of public land, especially in places like Lake County, Cooch, St. Louis, et cetera, our whole region. During the 2023 legislative session, I was able, for the first time in many years, to get an increase in payments on those public lands. What that did is that provided way more money to places like Lake County in order to reduce your property tax burden. The problem with public lands is they're not on the tax rolls. The good thing about them is it protects our public land so all of us can enjoy many of the treasures of northern Minnesota. So that's why the state provides those funds. Frankly, I have called out the governor on this and said, look, in your proposals for taxes, whether it's payment in lieu of taxes, whether it's aquatic invasive species funding, whether it's sustainable forest initiative funding that we get for our public forests and state lands, all of those are on the chopping block. And so I've really called that out and said, look, why are you targeting northern Minnesota with these cuts? There is absolutely no reason we should be targeting a specific region with cuts. What I have said is if there is going to be pain, and I don't want there to be pain, but if there's going to be, it should be equitable across all the counties and the Twin Cities and southern Minnesota as well. So, and I can guarantee you that the Senate tax bill will not have those cuts to PILT because I'm on the committee, I've called this out, and I've gotten the tax chair's commitment that we'll be protecting those cuts. Thanks.
Thanks, Grant.
All right, I have to do this.
Go ahead, Natalie.
This is a big deal because Minnesota had $18.5 billion surplus 2 years ago. And just 2 years ago, we worked hard to get that PILT from $2 to $3 an acre because of all the land that's not taxable in this district and our surrounding areas. So this governor's plan is detrimental to Two Harbors, the entire north. And it just for Two Harbors, the impact on this piece of the governor's plan could be 6% increase in the property tax. Property taxes are composed of school district, counties, and the city. And that doesn't account for the $460 million cut he's passing through to the counties for disability services. That could have another 7 to 9% increase in property taxes. So I'm very concerned on the shift because the taxes are getting shifted to the local level, which means you're all going to be paying more in your property taxes. And that can't happen, and that should not happen. So we're working hard on getting those initiatives to make sure your property taxes are not going to see an astronomical hit.
Thank you, Natalie. And Roger.
Thank you. This is an issue where you don't have to be a Democrat or a Republican. You just have to be a northeastern Minnesotan. And Grant hit everything exactly what I would say, and there's no difference. One of the issues you have to think, why is the governor doing what he's doing? And, he's out gallivanting around the country for, running for president. And he comes back and his staff comes in and sits down and says, we got to have a plan, we have to have a program. And I think what happened is they looked at the low-hanging fruit, and in northern Minnesota and our PILT, I have a bill to increase PILT. Our wetlands, our water, public lands next to water are $4 an acre. In southern Minnesota, it's $40 an acre. So we're like, hey, how about if you guys, look at us and give us what it's worth? And the governor comes out and says, I'm going to cut PILT. Cooch County is going to go up 30%. That's a fact. And it's not good. So Grant is correct. Don't put it in the bill. We're going to work on whether we can get Aisha and Greg Davids both to agree not to put it in our bill. It's still on the negotiating table. And I think that's what the governor is doing. The governor is finding things that really affect greater Minnesota, so that when you go to the negotiation in June, or hopefully before June, end of June, when a balanced budget, that he can use as tools for negotiating. So hopefully we can beat him down and not let him have those on the table. But that's kind of the long range what we're looking at. Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. I want to go to this question. Natalie, I'll have you start. I think you'll all have something to say about it, and I'll sort of refine it a bit for you, Grant. Regarding the 600 Iron Range miners expected to be laid off by the end of May, legislation is being proposed to extend unemployment benefits. And I'm pretty sure that you universally agree that that's a good idea. That's what I've been understanding from the reports. Natalie, could you explain where that's at right now in the process, and what issues you had before a recent shift as far as approving that?
We all agree that we need to extend the unemployment benefits, and that was clear at committee meetings this last week. I think the three of us up here agree that we also have to have a bridge to a future. The range's future is in jeopardy, and the range's future is the future for Silver Bay, is the future for the North, is the future. It's a regional economy. And we saw that when we saw 1,800 jobs or more be lost when we lost the plant in Gary, New Duluth in the 80s. And the sign said, last one here, shut the lights off. Does anybody remember that billboard? Well, just 2 years ago, the Star and Tribune did a big article on what happened to the range, what happened to Duluth. And they stated in there that Duluth changed and really never grew back in after the shutdown of U.S. Steel. And so with the range having 600 jobs lost like that, we're back to that day. And so what we have to face is, for 15 years, the union members testified at our committee, for 15 years they've been trying to talk about the same issues. It's like we've been talking and talking and task force and talking. And we're at the point right now that the ability to fund schools, the trust fund money, school trust money comes from mining. And that is through interest payments. But imagine what would happen. Every school, including Two Harbors, has got millions in cuts. And so imagine what would happen if mining is prospering for the area, for the ports and for taconite, and we get back to those days, because the schools would have the ability to do so much more. And we're in significant cuts for the schools. I mean, it is going to be monumental for what the schools are facing. And so we're looking at, we can't just have something short-term. Unemployment will run out. People are making decisions with their life. They have their biggest investment as a house. They have a partner or a spouse that has a job. And so if the mining goes, so do those workers, and they go somewhere else, and they often don't return. And so we want to make sure it's not just unemployment benefits, but we get together bipartisanly, and Grant supports us, and I support this, and Roger does, to make sure we deal with sulfites, and make sure we do an environmental standards, that we are the North. We want clean air and clean water. I've been in Minnesota my entire life, and I've lived up here for over 32 years. We all want that, and we have the best people in Minnesota, and I believe we can do it. And so we are united to get that done.
Thanks, Natalie. So, Grant, maybe you could explain for us the headlines that said Democrats opposed that unemployment extension unless it was unhinged from environmental regulation softening. Specifically, I understand there's more information that you are possibly supporting a reduction in sulfite standards. Go ahead, could you explain that?
Sure. So So in 2023, we also faced a similar circumstance at North Shore here in Silver Bay and in Babbitt. And when I was first elected, and Roger as well, part of the range delegation, we moved forward with the first bill of the session providing unemployment extensions for those workers. They had been out of work for more than a year. And so we have a success track record of how we have done this to make sure that our miners get the relief that they need. Natalie's exactly right. If we lose these miners in our communities, I mean, imagine Silver Bay without Cliffs, without North Shore. We would not be able to sustain ourselves up here. So this is critically important. These are skilled workforce members that we need to make sure stay in our communities. And so what's happening now is we're seeing that we have the unemployment at the table for these workers, but it's also being tied to the KTWH sulfate standard, which is a sulfate standard that KTWH is unable to meet at this time, which is 10 parts per million sulfate standard. And so I would love for us to get to a place someday where we can meet that standard. And I want to do everything in my power, whether it's funding through the NRRI in Hermantown to do that research, whether it's working with the U of M, all of these opportunities. But what I will not do is not take a vote to help protect and keep a place like KTWH open where hundreds of steelworkers work. So this is that balancing act. How do we make sure that we have the strongest environmental standards and the research and backing to make sure that we're meeting it, but that we're also saying, I'm not going to shut down a mine and put hundreds of people out of work because of a standard that we can't meet. So that's really where we're sitting right now with this unemployment, is that the Republicans in the House have decided to tie the two issues together. And I initially said, look, I think that's a risky move. Because what you are doing is, to the rest of the legislators who are not from northern Minnesota, you are highlighting this issue and making it political. And that worries me. Because what happens if this issue becomes politicized and we're unable to provide unemployment for these miners? That would be the worst case scenario. So what I have said, per usual with the position I'm in, is yes, I will help. I will do whatever I can on this idea of how we can tie these things together and help support our miners now and into the future. But I will also do everything in my power to get that unemployment passed in a clean bill that was passed out of the House committee by Representative Pete Johnson out of Duluth. So we're working on multiple angles here, and I think we need to be very careful about politicizing mining down at the Capitol, because unfortunately there are far more legislators that outweigh us up here, and we have to make sure that at the end of the day people's livelihoods are protected.
Thank you. I'm actually I was wondering what the answer to that question was too. I'm getting my answers too. Roger, I'm gonna have you start with something a little bit bigger, because I think it would be ridiculous for me to imagine that many of you aren't here worrying about federal issues. And, right? So I'm gonna ask a little bit of a broad question. Let's rip the Band-Aid off. Let's get it out there. Let's see what our local legislators want to say about that. So I have a question posed by Lisa sent in. There are a lot of cuts to funds and services from the Trump administration that will impact Minnesota, our counties, schools, seniors, vets, children and families, national parks, the boundary waters, businesses, the disabled community, and folks in poverty. It will lead to more unemployment. Making up the difference for some of these services will fall to the states. Since Representative Skraba won't meet with his constituents, have any of you been able to talk to him about the impact these cuts to our communities are having and ask him to fight for us? Roger. Can we have a little background music?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yes, okay, is that better? All right, thank you. Yes, I have spoken to the staff of Congressman Skraba and asked them where everything is, and I can use, they are monitoring it, watching it. Right now, the cuts have been made, but no one has felt them yet. I mean, not right away. Some of the employees have felt them, but like the cuts to different programs, they haven't been felt. There's talk in the legislature that we probably might have a special session in September, October, after the cuts. How are they affecting Minnesota, and what can we do as a legislature? There's been talk about that. I do want to use something as an example. When President Bush was in office, he was going to cut CDBG, Community Development Block Grants. And Senator Coleman was a U.S. Senator at the time. And I was the mayor of Ely. And we use CDBG in northern Minnesota professionally. Unbelievable how it works. It works the best. And other places in the country weren't using it. So I called Senator Coleman and said, you can't cut it. Tell the president we use it. And if you want examples, come to northern Minnesota. I will show you how it works. It works fantastically. Please don't cut it. 3 days later, I get a call from the president's office saying, hey, thanks for your comment. We are not going to cut CDBG. So I think it's important for you guys to know that our voices are heard, you know, and whether you're a mayor or a state rep or a senator, we do carry some weight. So when we call and say, hey, that's integral to our communities. Those cuts hurt. You know, relook it. Find somewhere else to cut. So I think if we carry that idea and we communicate to us so that we can communicate to the congressmen and to the U.S. senators. It's not just Stauber's issue. It's Senator Smith and Senator Klobuchar. And again, I think it's telling our story and saying that we use that, we need that. That's just not fluff, that's not waste. So that's how I'm tackling this issue.
Roger.
Yep.
Natalie, this question was sent specifically to be read to you. DOGE efforts to hollow out federal agencies like Social Security, DHS, NIH, HHS, etc., are going to eventually impact all of us in Minnesota. What is your position on DOGE activity, and are you and other state elected officials willing to stand with us in opposition to DOGE actions?
I think it's on. Thank you for the question. You know, just this week I met with the Commissioner of Health, and we talked about this, and I asked a lot of questions. I said, you know, tell me how you see this going, and she said the same thing. We're waiting to see. But as I understood my time with the Commissioner of Health, because I'm on the Health Committee, she stated that many of the cuts that are coming were COVID-related dollars that started in about 2020, and they always expected them to run out. They knew they were not part of their base grants. So I asked specific questions like, is the base funding for the grants going to be sustained? The answer was yes. So when I asked what is being cut in the health department in that pace, and it was specific grants that came from the federal government that were supposed to be pandemic related. And so that is passed, now we're in 2025, so it was never supposed to be ongoing. So that's what's being rolled back, and the divisions that they're talking about right now is a lot of this one-time money. And we've been talking about that at committee. A lot of the committee issues for Children and Family and Health Committee and Workforce were the same situation of one-time money that was, if it was one-time money or if it was actually base funding, and making sure that we're talking about that, because Minnesota right now has a $6 billion deficit too. And so we have several cuts right now coming to nursing homes. I mean, $300 million we just got for the nursing homes. Two Harbors is gonna lose $1 million if the $700 million to the nursing home cuts go through in just Minnesota. So I've been spending a lot of time with the Commissioner of Health on disability services, because right now the governor's budget is cutting services out of Minnesota money to disabilities and to the nursing homes in huge amounts of money to the base funding, which makes no sense to me, because Two Harbors and Grand Marais and Ely have one nursing home. They will not exist. And so if those things happen in Minnesota, so we're working really hard with that, and then I'm working with the commissioners for the committees I'm on to look at which block grants that were pandemic related, how it's going to be affected. And they don't have all the details, but I'm watching that, to your point too, so we can make good decisions so that our fundamental core services aren't in jeopardy, like disability services, like nursing homes for our seniors, and the list goes on.
Thanks, Natalie. Grant, with the federal cuts that have already been announced and starting to be implemented, what can you do to be a voice for Minnesotans at a federal level, and how are you working to help us relieve that impact?
Yeah, thanks, Kitty. Here's the thing about bipartisanship. Sometimes people think bipartisanship is only agreeing on things. But bipartisanship is also being willing to call out your own party and both sides when they're wrong. And in this case, I just got done saying when the governor proposed PILT cuts that I called him out publicly in tax committee, and I'm fighting him on that issue. I am putting just as much effort in pushing back against Donald Trump and the cuts that he is proposing to Medicaid, VA, Social Security, all of these things. So it doesn't matter to me which party you are. If you come after us, I will call you out, and I have. And if you think that Medicaid cuts, over $1 billion of Medicaid cuts, are gonna not harm rural communities like ours most, you're foolish. Because we are the ones that will take on the burden of those cuts. And rural hospitals, rural nursing homes, the VA, the veterans home in Silver Bay, these are the places that are gonna get impacted most. And so I have written a letter to President Trump. I've written a letter to Congressman Stauber on these issues. I've gone and met with Forest Service members about the cuts that they've faced. I had them come testify in the Senate Environment Committee to talk about their experiences of getting a note saying, by the way, you're out of a job starting tomorrow without any sort of merit-based decision. Any merit-based decision. And so I'm calling out all of these issues to make sure that we're defending our way of life here in northern Minnesota, and we need everybody to do that regardless of party. And I will just say one last thing. I went to Washington, D.C. to meet with Congressman Stauber, Senator Amy Klobuchar, and Senator Smith. Which one didn't meet with me? You go ahead and guess.
Thank you, Grant. So I want to invite Wade to come up. I'm gonna keep a firm grip on the mic, but if you put your name on a card and it gets passed up to me, I'm gonna ask you to come up and ask your question. So Wade LeBlanc, come on down. We'll get ready for that. And then Rich True can line up behind him. You guys know Wade. I said I'm not letting go of the mic.
I understand there's some bills, there's 4 bills, some in the Senate and some in the House regarding some zoning and housing. That would be taken away from cities to do their own legislating as far as zoning. If a city wants to change some of their zoning laws, why not let them do it? Why make it a state issue and take away some authority from local governing bodies?
Thank you, Wade. We'll have Natalie go first with that.
That's a great question. And, I have looked at all those bills. I've sent them to the counties. I've sent them to the cities and townships. And my perspective is I think we want local control. And I've shared that with Republican authors. Spencer Igo is one of the chairs, the Republican chair on the Housing Committee. And I've shared with him the concerns I have, and he's been great taking feedback on that. And to share that the goal is to get more housing. We know we have a housing shortage, and trying to get more units and have the price to get down and to create some of those models. But some of the, and then there's some Democrat in the House authored bills and Republican authored bills working on housing issues. But on all of them, some of them affect the townships, some of them affect everybody, some of them are for cities 10,000 and over like Hermantown. But the reality is, people's largest investment is their home, and so they really want to know what are the terms going to be. Where's the commercial areas for housing? Where's the residential housing? Where's dual use? All those type of provisions. And I think the communities where you live know that best. I think the city council, the county commissioners, the local control has an idea of the master plan for a comprehensive plan, city utility expansions. We have Highway 61 construction. So one of the bills I have authored in Hauschild is the Senate side is getting this expansion done for Highway 61 with utilities and all that goes with it so that we can have that ready for housing and commercial. But it's all very, very important. And, I think that's the perspective of looking at that.
Thanks, Natalie. Roger, do you have anything to add on that, on the planning and zoning, Wade's question?
Just the city of Two Harbors kind of did away with part of their zoning. You can add anything to a city lot, and that's kind of what this legislation is trying to do. It's trying to allow housing that's not usually allowed in a community, and it's going to be interesting to see if it makes it through. We did have a lot of robust discussion in the Housing Committee on this issue. Brought it back to our caucus, and there's a lot of our members, the Republican side, going, is this something we need? Do we have to do this? You know, and housing is, I can't explain it, but housing touches everyone, everywhere in the state. And we're trying to do a blanket way of solving it through zoning because developers don't know how to do it right. So we're going to try to give them tools to keep them doing it the way the state, some of us believe it should be done. Just anecdotally, one of the issues with the bill coming through with the zoning is parking is not part of it. So parking, you can put a 30 unit in a block, but you don't have to have parking. And it's kind of like, what, why not? Well, we want you to use transit. We want you to use local stuff. And again, in northern Minnesota, it's like, what? You know, but in the metro, this works, you know. So we're passing metro laws that affect the whole state because that's the only way. The counties down there don't want to pass them. The cities don't want to pass them. So the state is stepping in saying, if you guys don't do it, we're going to do it. And it's, you know, again, someone from planning, it's probably not the best way to do it, but it's a way. And right now, that's what we're trying to do, something, so.
Thanks, Roger. Grant, did you want to add to that?
I would just say that for those of you, you know, in your communities, if there was a new housing development or something happening in your community, would you rather that the power for you to go to your city council and your mayor to talk about your concerns with that project go away? Or do you want to keep that ability to talk to your local officials? I think these decisions are best made at the local level. I will be against these proposals. As a former city councilor, I know that experience. I know what it's like to meet with local residents about these types of developments. And it does concern me that our fellow representative on the Iron Range is leading the effort on this. And I have talked to him and said, I don't know if this really makes sense. This feels like a suburb Edina thing. Maybe we should step away from this in northern Minnesota and just let things stay the way they are.
Thank you. Thanks for answering that. I have a question from Todd, who I don't really think, we can still ask the question if you guys want to highlight it, but the question from Todd is, how do you plan to work across the aisle? I mean, here you are doing that. I don't know if you want to say more about that or not. I'll give you time if you'd like to. Go ahead, Grant, if you want to jump in.
Well, I have the opportunity to co-chair the Civility Caucus, which is a group that tries to bridge divides in the legislature, not necessarily on policy, but just simply bringing people together to get to know one another, talk about our similarities, have a happy hour, or go to an event together. And it's been really successful at bringing people together. I've gotten to know so many Republicans where we have, you know, young kids or similar interests in mind. And then eventually that leads to opportunities where you see policy similarities, you can then work with them later. The other thing I will say is I believe, and I don't know if you guys know, but I think this is the only bipartisan town hall happening in the entire state, in the legislature. And so I think you see the three of us really work really well together on the issues that we do agree on. And even when we don't, we're very civil and figure out how to make sure we're looking out for the Northland first.
Thank you. Natalie, did you want to comment on that?
I mean, my perspective has always been, we're Minnesotans first. We're Northlanders second. And so that's how I tackle everything. I had the opportunity to be on the conference committee as a first term last year, and the Democrat chair picked me to be on the conference committee. And I worked with him in negotiations with Bobby Joe Champion on making sure labor, and we got a lot for the North because I had a seat at the table. And I've created relationships with the other side. I'm on the ambulance task force. I went to Washington. I did see, the Democrats and the Republicans met with Skraba with me when I was there on working on ambulance solutions. And I also am on the aging task force. And I work with Ginny Cleavorn and Democrats on both sides of the aisle. And so there's several issues that we've been working on together, and I work with John Hoffman on a senator at nursing homes. He's very opposed to the governor's cuts. He and I work together all the time on what are we going to do. He was awarded an award for supporting nursing homes when I was. So to me, that's what we should be doing. We have to work on the problems that we face for the state and the problems we face for the region. But at the end of the day, you know, right now I'm a bill author for a bill for homeless. We put a lot of money in homeless housing and people that serve them, especially in the Duluth area and in bigger cities. But they have to do criminal background checks, and the state is very slow. I had to do criminal background studies with people in assisted livings and nursing homes. So I'm the author, and I have a Democrat co-author on there too, under with me, that Democrats, to get this bill passed so that they can run a background check through a secondary private company so they can get these background checks done so they can really help people. Because if we have all this money allocated, but you can't help people because we can't get the fingerprinting done, it's crazy. So we look for solutions, and we're getting things done like that, and so I think we all are interested in doing that, and we have to do that. We represent 44,000 people, and they all don't vote for us, and that's okay.
So sensible. Roger, I know what you're going to say because we've had this conversation, but we can't skip it because you're like the poster child for bipartisanship. So, you know, say your spiel.
Just really quick. I sit on capital investments, and capital investments, in order to pass a capital investments bill, you got to have 3/5 of majority. And the group, we have Democrats, Republicans. The other night, Monday night, we all went out for dinner. That's just doesn't happen. Committees don't do that, but we do, because we understand our role throughout the state. I mean, when you hear bills in Monoman, Minnesota County, that there's a nursing home with 34 beds, and there's 33 people, and there's one shower for the all 33. And it's like, what? It's 2020. What are we doing? How can we do that? So you don't have to be a Republican or a Democrat to see it, but in order to pass it, you have to work together. So you bring issues like this that we can all agree on, and then the difficult ones, we agree to disagree. Like Grant and I on the paid family leave, we go to I Falls or wherever we're at, you know, and he's, it's the best thing, and I'm like, I don't think we have enough money right now, you know, but we respect each other's stance on it, and we know that there's very similar out in the public. So, and the people want to know that we're listening, and that we can formulate thoughts that bring in both sides. And that's kind of what I try to do. Again, coming from a mayor's position was, you get elected by everybody. And I'd like to think that I got elected the second time by everybody because I won by a pretty good margin. But because people are seeing that I don't run to a side and say, this is it. I'm willing to take the heat for some of the stances I take, and that's just politics. That's just the way it is. It's the way it goes. But Grant and I, it's been a very interesting, because the legislator looks at us like, oh, there's your buddy and all that, and I'm like, yeah, so what? You know what?
I think we should give all three of these guys a big round of applause for those answers, for sure. Because we want stuff to get done, right? This is what I'm talking about. I see Rich is here, ready to ask his question. Let's see, do you have it memorized? There you are.
Well, I'll kind of alter it first of all. No worries, you hold on to that thing. Because we already touched on the issues around the jobs in the mining sector right now. Now, considering some of the words that we've heard from the union workers on the Iron Range during these committee meetings, that some of these jobs may never return. It's not always wonderful to look at the worst case scenario, but you have to go along with what's in reality. So I want to hear more of a visionary statement from each one of you as to what is the 5-year plan if it doesn't come back, beyond just talking about sulfide mining. I think we've kind of hit that to death almost sometimes. And what are you guys willing to do to help facilitate a robust, diverse economy where we are not always reliant on snow here in the winter, that we've had 2 very sunny winters, I guess you could say, for the most point. And thank you.
Thanks, Rich. And good question. He gets applause for a great question. Okay, Grant, go ahead.
It's a great question. A couple of things. We do have the Iron Range Rehabilitation Agency, which does grants looking at trying to diversify our economy using mining dollars. And through that, we have done things like funded the second largest solar manufacturer in the country in northern Minnesota. which I think is a pretty incredible thing. I don't know how many of you knew that we have that. I mean, that is a big deal for our region to have a green energy entity like that. We've also had conversations with a magnet company looking to settle up in northern Minnesota. The IRRB has talked to them. Legislators, I'm sure we have all probably talked to them. So there are people that are interested. I will tell you though, the biggest challenge we face in northern Minnesota and probably greater Minnesota is that we can't get the workforce for these groups that want to come up here and open a facility that could hire 400, 500 people. And the issues that they face are housing, childcare, education opportunities for their kids. These are the things that young families and middle-aged folks are looking at when they're determining where to settle. My wife and I, we chose northern Minnesota. I'm not from here. I haven't lived here my whole life. But I am somebody that chose to live here because I love it up here, and I think we're the best of Minnesota. But we need more people to do that. And so to do that, that's why I focus so much on the bread and butter issues, like trying to make childcare available, trying to make sure that we get equitable funding for our schools, trying to make sure that we're funding capital investment projects that increase the quality of living for our rural residents, things that will attract people to settle in our region so that when businesses are looking to open up, that they will choose northern Minnesota because they know that the workforce will be there. The last thing I would just say very quickly, it's great that we look at large industries and we need to attract those 100+ person jobs. We also need to support entrepreneurs and local folks here starting small businesses. And I have challenged the IRRB to do a better job at focusing on those people so that we can grow business from the inside out here in northern Minnesota.
Thanks, Grant. I can see Natalie's ready to roll, build on that. Tell us what you think about diversification of the economy and the things that Rich asked about.
I think, I spent a lot of time with the steelworkers this week, and, these are $100,000 jobs. So I think mining is really critical for Minnesota and all the spin-off businesses that go in Minnesota, and I'm all for diversification. I've been for diversification in our energy portfolio, but our energy portfolio, needs to have solar, wind, it needs to have natural gas. We need to have the moratorium lifted for nuclear. We need to do all of it because the all or none mentality, when we're not ready for it, means all of our costs are going higher. So what we have in the backyard here is everything we need for the minerals to run all these devices that we have. Not only that, but we have helium that's been discovered here, so we have the ability to extract helium, which is needed for dental devices, all these things. We have the port here, so Two Harbors should be the port. So we're working on all those things of how our royalty is going to go. How is this going to go for helium to make sure northern Minnesota benefits, and we get as much as we possibly can for the north, and that's my position on it from the helium standpoint, and then making sure we have mining. But, I hate to see us lose out on an opportunity because if you don't have stability for the businesses, whether they're small business, small businesses are 500 employees or under. But when you're looking at the mines, it's 600 people. That's a big business. They're $100,000 jobs and all of that economy that goes with it of a spinoff. So when you have security for a region, you get the small businesses to grow, and we have 2 Mecca hospitals in Duluth. They need the employees, but people will not move here if they don't have economic security. And that's why mining is so critical for the North, because we have the largest deposit of nickel, the largest deposit of many of these things here, and that's just fact. So we have to figure out what we're going to do in Minnesota and if we're going to lead the way for this next green energy thing, because everything we need to make it, we're importing from other countries that don't have the labor laws that we have here. They don't have the $100,000 job. They don't have laws against child labor. They don't. And so I would rather have Minnesotans lead it with Minnesota mining because we will assure that the best happens with the people of Minnesota.
Thanks, Natalie. Roger, similar question, but just a little bit more refined because you kind of live and breathe this in Ely and you always have. So outside of mining, outside of tourism, what ideas do you have around diversification in our economy?
That's where I was going. Because the obvious ones, and great question, Rich, and good seeing you again. We campaigned against or worked together to get elected. That's a better way to say. It's more positive, and it was refreshing to have an independent, when we talked about energy, the nuclear part, where something has to give, and the energy is part of it. I'm going to focus on something Grant had said about diversifying the economy. And there's a company in International Falls called Green Tech, and they make boilers, outdoor boilers. And they took the Lampa manufacturing idea for a sauna stove, a small stove, to reburn the gases, make it more efficient, EPA approval, just a lot of thought. They're putting it in an outdoor boiler to the next level. And they're selling these all over the country. I think South Carolina, North Carolina is their biggest people right now. So made in literally northern Minnesota, a mile and a half from the Canadian border. So, and they're looking for 15 welders. They're always looking for people. And we try to help International Falls as much as we can. Where we can, needed a water treatment plant and capital investment, so we have to vote to help get money for that. We have to put all these daycare, keep taxes down. They need a jail up there. Similar here, when Labonte, we have all these companies down here that the manufacturing in this community is phenomenal. I mean, it is something that's just short of, it's so good. And when the helium first came, my first thought was we need to use Two Harbors as the base. So all the gas would come through here, either on rail, on road, or in a ship, shipped around the world, because you have everything here. It's it. This is a great getting off place. And one of the things that I use in a lot of my discussion is, in northern Minnesota, we don't have 1 million people like in the metro area. They got 3 million people. They just pass money around and make economies with businesses. Up here, we have millions of trees and millions of pounds of dirt. And we take dirt and we make steel. And we take trees and we make paper. We do that up here. We do it. We've always done it, and we'll continue to do it. We just have to accept the fact that there is risk when you do that. And how much of the risk are we willing to take, and where are we willing to take it? So to diversify our economy, NRRI, natural resource, I get the part.
Research Institute.
Resources.
Yes.
Institute. We just had a bill the other day and I testified for them and with them, but green steel. We're going to try to, we know there's hydrogen in Minnesota. We know there's hydrogen in northern Minnesota. We just haven't found it. We're getting closer. And when we find that hydrogen, that natural energy, what are we going to do with it? So we are talking, we're having sit down. That's the whole thing with NRRI. They're going to try to figure out what's the best use for it. There are companies that want to come up and use it. They're looking at it, using it for vehicles, energy vehicles. Some of us are looking like, can't we have a power plant here? So we can run all of our steel plants and everything out of natural. And then a taconite processing plant. Eventually put steel in northern Minnesota. That's going to be the goal. The goal is to make steel here instead of shipping it out of here the other way. You can ship steel out of here. That's not a problem.
Okay, so I'm going to invite some of you to come up and ask your questions yourself if you want to. I have Ben Karlsgaard, Bert Highland, Barb Lukanen, and Rick Cleeth. If you guys want to make your way up, I'm going to warm them up as you come down. Do you want me to say those names again? Ben Karlsgaard, Bert Highland, Barb Lukanen, and Rick Cleeth. So here's one. Here's a question that has come up several times, and Kutch has kind of tried to make it broad enough and let each of you respond to it. What is most important to you in regards to gender issues? I think that's fairly open and vague, and it'll be interesting to hear what you say. I think that we're well aware that transgender athletes' rights are being talked about a lot at the state capitol. So, Grant, you want to go first?
Sure.
You're all going to have to answer the question.
Here's what I would say. I really think when you consider the gender equity in sports issue, my concern about some of the legislation that is being proposed is, as a father of a young daughter and a young son, and a young daughter who's a little bit more forceful, let's say, than the son, I don't want a scenario to play out where we have a law in Minnesota that encourages people to be suspicious of my daughter's gender. I don't want a situation where someone can go to a coach or a school resource officer or someone and say, I don't know, that Isla, she seems a little bit too aggressive for a girl. Let's identify what her gender is. How would we do that? What is the mechanism by which we would identify young girls' genders? Once someone can tell me that process, I will have a conversation. But until that point, I will not pass a law that encourages folks to investigate my young daughter's gender.
Thank you, Grant. Natalie, same question.
Well, I grew up on a farm with a cowboy hat, long hair, no makeup, and jeans on a tractor, and nobody was concerned with, everybody knew I was a girl. I didn't have to prove I was a girl. It was never a thing. And I kind of am surprised at that question because I was rambunctious, talked to everybody, pretty lively, grew up with brothers, raised 2 sons, and nobody questioned it, ever. I think we've been saying it's a boy, it's a girl. There's gender reveal parties all the time. I think it's pretty simple. My primary concern is Title IX passed in the 70s. We are 50 years from having no female sports for female athletes. That's significant to me. I get a lot of emails from people in this room that fought for it, and now I'm fighting for it. And I will fight every day for Title IX for my future granddaughters. I was not an athlete. I rode horse. But I have no problem saying it's ridiculous to think we can't say what a woman is and what a man is. So young female athletes, and I get emails from girls in college saying, I'm trained my whole life for this. I am not going to compete. I have people coming to the Capitol saying right now they've got middle school girls going to travel teams for basketball, and they're just not going on, they're not playing. It's not safe. They cannot compete with a 6-foot man that has a completely different genetic makeup. To think that we don't have a different bone structure, a different lung structure, we do. It doesn't mean we're not equally great in different ways, but we are different, and there has always been males, and there's always been females, and that will continue. And people can identify however they want, but it doesn't change the fact that we need to keep girls safe. And we need to make sure Title IX is protected because it's going to not, if not, we don't really have female sports. They're not going to be able to compete.
Thanks, Natalie. Roger.
Thank you. I come from the side of the tracks that if that floats your boat, that floats your boat. That's good. I'm going to let you do whatever you want to do. Part of me, though, I do come in on the, is it fair to have males compete with females? We need, as a society, we need to discuss the best way to determine that. Grant is, it is, how do you say what you are, other than the fact that whenever we have these discussions about, trans people, I never, when I worked in a summer on Capitol Hill, I was the only person in the bus a lot of the times in Washington, D.C. in 1983. I was the only person, the white person, anywhere at a lot of the time. I never felt at all out of place. I sent a letter to the mayor, Mayor Barry at the time, saying, I love your town, what a great town. It was fantastic. I would walk by myself from the Woodner to the giant grocery store. I never felt threatened. I'm just a guy from northern Minnesota. Hi, how's it going? So I treat people like that. I mean, my neighbor and neighbors have become different people than what they were when I first met them. And hasn't changed. Still, hi, how's it going? Play with the dogs. So it doesn't, that's your thing. I respect you for that. I do. When we start going into competing in sports, yeah, let's try to figure something to make it fair because some of it doesn't make sense.
Thank you, Roger.
Thank you.
And now I have a question from Barb.
You're holding. you're holding it. So we all know that we're facing budget shortfalls, both from the federal level and at the state. We all want increased PILT. We want our rural health care. We want our hospitals, our disability, our nursing homes, education, the environment. We want all those things, but we know we can't fund everything at the level that we would like. So what kinds of things, what kinds of cuts or programs would you address or suggest? And specifically, do you support reducing funds to private schools per pupil funding and transportation funding as one option?
All right, Natalie, I'm going to throw that to you first.
Back again. Thank you for the question. I'll first talk about what ideas, what could we cut? The first thing that comes to my mind is, and there's several people that have been saying this, we have a $194 million train from St. Paul to Duluth that doesn't have to be a priority when we have all these cuts coming right now. And that money is basically all still there, hasn't been spent yet, and is also dependent on a federal match. So, or federal money. That's one thing. I believe there has been, well, actually I know there's been $60 million allocated a year for free health care for non-citizens. That's something we never did prior to 2023, is give illegal Minnesotans free health care. So that's something that I think needs to be discussed. The trains, the other trains, the Blue Line had an expansion for $30 million. Southwest, we know the Southwest light rail isn't going to be done till 2027, and it's over a $2 billion project with all these extensions. It never came in on time. It's 10 years late. And so the solution for me, I want to see the money go into the buses and back to some of those things from the areas. And I want money allocated for greater Minnesota for non-emergency transportation. On the EMS task force, I mean, 70%, if not more, of our ambulance runs are non-emergency because we don't have transportation for people. And so I don't want to see this money going to trains right now when we don't have the basics set up. So that's the first pull I would do. And then these other programs that were initiated in 2023 that we could eliminate and get some of these core services for disabilities and these other essentials funded.
Thanks, Natalie. Roger, what would you cut if you could, and would you support, there was a little addendum on that, would you support cuts to private school per diem, or
Do you want to? Okay.
I do not support the cuts. I get a lot of calls. That's been going on for, I think, since the 90s, where they've been doing, 70s. It's that long ago that they've been doing that transportation aid, and for transportation, for homeschool, and also for programs with sports, and then also for private schools. That's been a long-standing program for access to education for all people, for people to have the choice where they go. So that non-pupil aid that has health services that follows a homeschool child or a private school child, health services, mental health counseling services, and transportation has been available since the 70s. Why now? Why are we pulling that from family? I don't support that at all. I also don't support pulling the transportation side of that for the families. I don't think that's the answer at all.
thanks, Natalie.
Okay.
All right, Roger, same question to you.
And the reason I keep looking at my phone is I can't believe it took us an hour to talk about education. We're in the building. We haven't spoken about education once, not once. And I find it somewhat unusual because in the legislature, housing, education, in my world, number one and number two. Those two are big issues. And they should be, because our future libraries are part of it. I'm a big library supporter, you know, and that's where I cross the aisle. I go to the other side. All the time, because my grandparents came from Slovenia, and they didn't speak English, so they sent the kids to the library if they didn't go to school to learn how to speak and how to acclimate to be American. So I look at libraries as a place, as a melting pot where people can come together and learn. And I taught junior grade books for 14 years in our school, elementary school in Ely, and I had one student in 14 years. When I asked them, I said, what do you think, ask every student, what do you think about reading? What's so important about reading? And the one child said, I can go anywhere in the world reading. And I'm like, you got it. You figured it out. Because that's so important. We can be anything we want by reading. anything, so we can learn. And that's important. And whether you're in a private school or a public school or a charter school, I think it's important that we as society look at that and support that. When I leave here this afternoon, I'm driving to Chisholm, Minnesota to meet with Education Minnesota about issues that pertain to teachers. So it's what would I cut? I know I wouldn't cut schools. That's something I can't do. It's so important that if you really want to see the disparity, the difference in people who are successful and people who are not, who finished school really is the beginning. And now we know from birth to 5 years old, that is so important that those children get taught just the basics, just to get their brains to work right, how to read, how to function, how to do that. Just so important that we support that. So I wouldn't cut those. Right now, we're gonna, and truthfully, we're probably not gonna have a lot to say what gets cut. I mean, our leadership can help, but once the people in the room start cutting or finding out what that budget's gonna look like, because right now we're $6 billion short, and actually more like 3 now, because there's been some movement. But it's still a $3 billion shortfall. So something's gonna get cut.
Thanks, Roger.
Yep, sorry.
And Grant, when you're looking at the shortfalls in budgeting, what would you cut? What would you advocate for cutting? And would you touch the private school funding?
One of the things I think we have to decide on the forefront of these budget discussions is being truthful about the budgets that we're putting forward. And what we're facing right now is a circumstance where the governor has put forward his budget, which a lot of folks have concerns about, me included. We have a Senate who put a budget forward, and we have the House who put their budget forward. The unfortunate circumstance is that the House proposal that they put forward in their budget leaves a $1.3 billion deficit on the bottom line. I don't agree with that. I think, unfortunately, in the state of Minnesota, we have to be fiscally responsible and balance our budgets. And so the Senate has said that, the governor has said that, and unfortunately in the House they have decided to leave a deficit. And I think what that does is it just builds the problem over time. It just creates a circumstance where for our kids, for our elders, for the folks that are most vulnerable, we're just gonna have to make more difficult decisions in a year from now than we will right now. So I'd rather address the core challenges that we have. I think Representative Zeleznikar is right. There are some transportation issues that we can look at, cutting that are not necessarily absolutely necessary transportation options for folks. I will also say I don't support cutting private school per pupil funding or transportation funding. But again, we have to be honest. We have to make these decisions. It's really easy for politicians to say, no, I don't support any of these cuts, and eventually somebody else is gonna tell me what we're cutting, and I'll just figure that out later, and we'll leave a deficit. That's not the way that I wanna operate. I wanna operate from a place of honesty, and so do I wanna cut private schools and transportation? Of course not, and I'll do what I can to not do that. But if it means cutting Lake Superior School District, if it means cutting Ely Public Schools, if it means cutting Hermantown Public Schools instead, well, that's a decision we have to make. So I don't know what the right answer is, but I'm telling you I'm gonna be honest when I do this budget work and tell you what's on the table, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you, Grant. The next question we have from Ben in the audience.
This is for Senator Hauschild. In your permitting bill, which I believe was heard yesterday, you limit the ability for people to comment on proposed projects to those who live in the project's county or an adjoining county. But what about public land, particularly for Minnesotans who live in the city's area? Public land in the Northland is their only resource for recreation. Public land belongs to all Minnesotans, and everyone should have the opportunity to comment. Are you willing to make an exception for public land for all Minnesotans?
Good question.
Thanks so much for the question. I just want to kind of explain this. It gets a little in the weeds, but I just want to make sure everyone knows what we're talking about. So when you go through the environmental permitting process, there is 2 different tiered permits. There's EAWs, an environmental assessment worksheet, which is for lower tier 1 projects. And then there's an environmental impact statement, which is for large industrial projects. Think mining projects, highways, power plants, the big stuff, right? Paper mills. Those are environmental impact statements. In my bill, we do not touch the EIS, the large industrial projects. So to the individual's question, when we're talking about our public lands, when we're talking about many of the things that many of us value up here in northern Minnesota, my bill does not restrict anybody's comment ability on those public projects. What I'm saying is if there are smaller scale projects like a hotel or a development in Hermantown, I don't really think it makes sense to have somebody in the Twin Cities be able to petition for one of those EAWs on a project like that. Let's let the locals, similar to the zoning conversation that we just had, right? Why can't we let these local decisions happen at the local level? The neighbors around those projects know what's happening most of those projects. It's only 100 signatures. Believe me, if folks have an opposition to a project, they're gonna find 100 signatures. It's not that hard. And so that's what we're doing. It's a small scale thing. If I'm being honest, because I've been honest all day today, we're probably going to remove it from the bill anyway, because people do have opposition to it. But we're going through the negotiations and we'll see where we land. I do know that people are really passionate about this. I just want to make sure people understand it's not the large industrial projects, it's for the smaller scale projects, and we're going to negotiate it and figure out where we land. I really do appreciate your comments about it.
Thank you. Thanks for your answer, Grant. All right, let's talk about Canada. How about that?
Ooh, Canada.
Natalie, I'll have you start this one. Canada is our good neighbor and economic partner. What are you doing to keep it that way?
Well, I'm working on childcare, so I hope we talk about childcare at some point because I get a ton of calls about families asking about what we're doing with childcare. I mean, I think from Canada, I mean, my perspective at the state capitol is that's not the purview I'm in. I'm going to go to Canada and enjoy Canada like everybody else does when I can, and then wait and see how this goes. But I understand that we want to be neighborly and everything, but we have to also address figuring out the federal government's going to have to figure out their role. In the state of Minnesota, I'm waiting to do what we can do with trying to get our natural resources solid, make sure we have energy here, make sure we're shipping, making sure we have a way to heat our homes. And so we're not getting energy from North Dakota. We don't need to get it from Canada. We have the way to have natural gas and all the different things that we need. So, I mean, I think Minnesota will continue to be neighborly with Canada, and that's not going to change. I'm waiting to see how the federal things is, if you're talking about tariffs and all that, turns out too. And it's not certainly anything the three of us up here have jurisdiction to control at that piece, but I do think that these things, we're just going to find out how it's going to go. Roger's right on the border, so I know he's just chomping at the bit. So I'll let him talk about Ely because he has a lot probably to say.
Thanks, Natalie. I'll just phrase this a little bit different because we did get this question more than once. Roger, what is your perspective on tariffs? Oh, no. On Canadian steel when Cleveland Cliffs owns steel mills in Canada and ships Minnesota taconite to them?
Okay. Does our taconite, I didn't know our taconite.
It was a
went to
question
Canada.
from the crowd. I didn't get
thought
to
it
vet
went
that.
south.
You tell me if that's wrong.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with it going up to Canada. I thought it was all going south, but it's,
Here, we'll put you on the mic, sir.
yeah.
So, I mean, this is tying back into stability in the Iron Range. Cleveland Cliffs bought Stelco steel mill outside of Mississauga in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And so Cleveland Cliffs is shipping Minnesota taconite to Canada. So is that going to be part of the tariffs? Because as you know, the automobile and steel industry is highly integrated with the United States. So the tariffs imposed on Canadian steel, how are they going to affect the taconite mining on the Iron Range? Which it should.
It hasn't. It's been tariffed already. When we bring our across, but how I don't know if there was something new just recently. The Senate didn't vote with the president on the Canadian tariffs specifically. I just heard that today. I don't know if that's what the truth is. I didn't have time to follow up on it. But if it's gonna affect it, I believe they laid off people in, Cliffs laid off people in Canada. They shut one of them down. I don't know if that's the one, because they have a presence, they have a couple present places that they do business in Canada. Right. So I'm not familiar with this one you're speaking to. I do want to just bring up the Canadian issue. I was just in Canada Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, so I donated to the country. And what's new in Canada is if you go to the border and you have your food with you, we paid a 25% tariff. Well, on Friday, we paid $107 to get our food across the border. So, I mean, where is this all going? And what is our role as legislators? Other than me sitting down with the Canadian consulate saying, you know, keep us posted what's going on. The RABCs were a big issue just recently, remote area border crossing permits. Canadians canceled them, and then they realized they had it, and then they reopened them. It's an issue because there's a lot of Americans that go to Canada that have houses in Canada, and they go back and forth. When I met with Canadians during the weekend when I was up north, they want to abolish the border. They just want to be Canada, but they don't want to deal with the border issues. So and those of us that live here, we're kind of the same way. Like, yeah, why are we trading money back and forth to each other? Why can't we just, you know, you're Canadian, I like you. I'm an American, you like me. You know that? Can we just do that?
Can we just, let's
just
be
get along.
neighbors.
Sorry.
Okay, I'm gonna give you a shot at that, Roger. Do you wanna talk about Canada? I'm sorry, Grant.
No, it's okay. Roger and I get confused all the time. We look alike, we act alike. Just kidding.
I wish I was as skinny as he was.
Well, Roger and I represent 65% of the Canadian border, if you can believe that, in Minnesota. Our district's the largest, most rural district. You've probably heard me talk about this a lot. Canada is really fundamentally important to our economy in northern Minnesota. Yep. We were just up, Roger and I, up in International Falls, and before I went, I called the Chamber of Commerce lead in Fort Francis because they are so reliant on our economy for that border community. We know that Grand Portage and Grand Marais are reliant on Canadian traffic coming down to the casino, coming down to tourism and visiting Grand Marais and the North Shore, probably getting down to Two Harbors and Duluth as well. So this is really, really important. What we've seen since the tariffs have gone into effect is a 20% drop in Canadian economic output in America. That is a huge impact. And where do you think, again, the theme of today, where does that impact most? Border communities like us, northern Minnesota, northern states that are connected to Canada. So this really matters for us. Here's what I'll say about tariffs. I believe that tariffs are a critical tool in our tool shed when it comes to protecting critical domestic industries that we rely on for our well-being, for our national security, things like the steel industry, right? We should use tariffs to our advantage to stop steel dumping, to stop other countries from pouring in low labor standards and environmental standards on the things that we can do better here. Unfortunately, what we're seeing with this administration is across the board, everywhere, all at once, on allies and adversaries, tariffs everywhere. And what we've seen in the stock market over the last 2 days is some of the largest cuts in the stock market in our history because of these tariffs, and it's just beginning. Now, will some of it get pulled back? Will there be exemptions? Do we know if automobile parts will get impacted? I don't know because I frankly can't follow what this administration is doing. But what I will say, when meeting with folks like the steelworkers, it is really important that we keep tariffs on the table for certain industries. What I'm trying to explain is if we do these across-the-board tariffs, it's going to have an indirect impact on the automobile industry. Cleveland-Cliffs provides 80% of the steel for the automobile industry. You don't think tariffs is going to impact them, thus impacting miners indirectly? Of course it is. So I would prefer we do strategic tariffs like we've done in the past and get rid of this chaos that's happening right now.
Thank you. Go ahead, Roger.
One of the unique things about the district at Grant and I had staff try to figure out how many miles of border They said we have 350 miles of Canadian border that we represent, which is a lot. It's like from Ely to Fargo, that's 300 miles. That's where I went to college. But in International Falls, Rainier, there's a bridge that crosses the Rainy River, and it is the third most used port of entry for rail in the United States. I mean, the whole border. It is the number, and it's constantly, it's busy all the time. And right now, Canada wants to redo the bridge. So we're working together with DNR and with everyone, trying to get this bridge put in properly. And those relations, we do have a say in what happens. But the Cliffs questions got me. I'm gonna have to make some phone calls, which I can't do when I leave here to go to Chisholm. 'Cause once you go over the hill, it's
Yeah.
over.
And I like get more information.
Yep.
We want to
Yep.
know that you're trying to find out. Go ahead,
I
Grant.
just want to make a very short comment. This is actually a really good example of why working together matters. And I'm going to admit something, I literally know nothing about this bridge that he's talking about. But I know that Roger's got it. I know that Roger's all over it, and he's focusing on that issue, and I'm focusing on other issues. This is why we elect multiple legislators, because we can't all do everything. But Roger's been on this like white on rice since the beginning, and he gets to do that and then sort of inform me as we go. I know Natalie and I are the same on different issues, but it does matter that we're able to sort of have our own lanes and figure out what we're working on so we can cover everything for the district.
Yeah, absolutely. Of everyone here, if you live in this district, like, do you look at the map? I haven't been. The miles these people must put on. It's a huge amount of landscape. Okay, we're going to start doing a lightning round. We're 15 minutes to our end. So I'm just going to hit you with a topic, and then we'll go different topic, different person, and then we'll have a couple of minutes for you just to catch anything that we didn't get. There's a lot of questions. Thank you guys for all of your questions. We're not going to get to all of them. Any that we didn't ask here, I'm going to send home with these guys for homework. So, all right. Roger, I was going to tell, okay, here we go. Moratorium on automatic weapons, for or against, and why? That comes from Ken.
It's illegal to have an automatic weapon now. So, pardon? No,
Bully
right now,
on that.
Yeah, I can't, if I'm a military guy, I had an M16A1, it was fully automatic. I could not possess it legally. I have to go to the government and register with it, and they do not give those out.
I'm going to assume they meant semi-automatic.
No,
no?
semi-automatic. I've got 8 of them.
Okay.
I wouldn't support that. No.
Okay, so there you go. There's your answer if you had that one. All right, thanks, Roger. I'm glad you knew about that because I don't understand that issue. Nuclear. You had mentioned nuclear, Natalie, and the need to lift the moratorium on that. Would you like to say more on your thoughts on that?
No, we need to make sure we have affordable energy. And I think that Republicans and Democrats, there's bipartisan support this year for addressing the moratorium for nuclear, looking at hydro, looking at all kinds of things, biomass, all kinds of things to include green energy and everything. But I think we need a diversified portfolio. If you look at that MISO grid, you can see how much we rely on the grid and that we are not prepared for it going forward. So we need an all-inclusive energy portfolio, in my opinion.
Thank you, Natalie. Grant, these are the surprise questions. Do you believe the gray wolf will be delisted? Or go ahead and just answer that question. What do you think about delisting the gray wolf? Yeehaw. I couldn't make it too easy.
What? Why do I get all the hard questions?
Oh, no.
Just kidding. I don't. No, I don't. I don't think we have the votes. We've done this, twice now since we've been elected. I don't see the votes happening. But, we'll see what happens here, I guess.
And your vote would be?
My vote would be to let the DNR do a hunt like they've organized in their management plan. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
I'll answer the nuclear thing too.
Sure, please go ahead.
And I guess I can answer the automatic too. For nuclear, I fully support lifting the nuclear moratorium. I believe firmly in meeting our climate goals and addressing climate change, but I also know that in order to meet those goals, we have to have nuclear on the table. But I do want to add some nuance to this. I don't know how many folks realize that when we had our initial nuclear plants through Xcel Energy back in the 70s, we stored, despite what they said, we stored that nuclear waste at Prairie Island against the tribe's will. And I think that is shameful, and I think that's wrong. And so as we now live in the future and have better relations, we have to at least acknowledge the mistakes that happened in the past, lift the nuclear moratorium, and work with our tribes to ensure that that never happens again. So I just wanted to make that point.
Thanks, Grant. There are so many questions that I would love to hear your answers to, but I'm going to pose one more before I just let you have your say, and I'd like all of you to respond to it because it's on a lot of people's minds. The paid family leave
Right.
deal. Where is it at? What are you advocating for? And we'll just go right across the stage.
Where I believe we should have something like this. I'm not opposed to it, but I'm opposed to right now what we're doing. We don't have the funding. It's not ready. It's not ready to roll out. The state has not, it's too expensive. And we have this earn sick and safe time right now, which I think if we leave that in place, and just put a moratorium, a one-year moratorium on the paid family leave so we can have more time to see what it's going to affect, how much is it going to cost. There's so many questions. I don't want to take up all the time here because I could easily take up 15 minutes and it's not fair to everyone. But I think conceptually, I agree. I think there should be something in our system that allows people to have time off and not lose their job. I think there needs to be something. The one that we're looking at right now, we're not ready for. And if we try to roll it out, it's just going to be disastrous. We're just not ready.
Thanks, Roger. Paid family leave.
I agree with Roger. The issue of the why do we want paid leave, everybody understands it, supports it. I do too. I understand what it is. I think I'm on labor and workforce, so we've had many conversations, and there's been many different bills introduced to delay it a year, to carve out small business, to, change if it stays the way it is. Right now, it's basically 20 weeks between a medical and a family classification, but the payroll tax is higher than what they anticipated even since we started talking about this. So the concern is a lot of reasons to believe DEED isn't really ready to roll this out. They've allocated, I think, $1 billion to get a program up and running, and they've hiring a bunch of staff. But people are just saying, why are we growing government by 40% with employees and creating all these new divisions when we have schools losing millions, including 2 harbors? So that's the kind of things that I look at and go, are we ready for this right now? And is the scope that they're asking for, is it something we can sustain? To Senator's point, we have a $6 billion deficit that we're staring down, and we're trying to get that rolled out. And that's before paid family leave starts under the way it was written in 2023. It rolls out January 1 of 26. And so if it's not, I don't believe it's going to be sustainable from what I'm seeing and the history of what's happened with other programs when we rolled them out. And so that concerns me when we're seeing the governor's budget already in Minnesota have cuts for the nursing homes, for childcare, for disabilities, and then we're adding another program. I just don't know that it's the most responsible thing to do. I would like to see it reformed and work together in a bipartisan way so that it will be long-term a positive solution and sustainable.
Thanks, Natalie. And then he said...
Well, this is where we differentiate, right? I definitely support a paid family medical leave program. It's something that I ran on when I ran. I have a young family, as I mentioned. They're here today. And my wife's an advanced practitioner at the hospital. And I've seen the impact of what happened to her as a hard-working, frontline healthcare staff person, having 2 young children in a row, having a busy husband like me, and the impact that has. I know many of you have gone through that as well. We need to make sure that our families are able to be with their children during those critical development months. All of the research shows that 0 to 5 is the critical time that makes the biggest impact on the outcome of people's lives. So if we can make it that much easier for people, regardless of their economics, to be with their child during those months, that's something that matters a lot to me. So it's something that I fought hard for. I will say on the funding piece, Representative Skraba mentioned that we don't have the money and it's not funded. That would be the equivalent of looking at the federal government's budget debt, which is massive, right? And saying, we can't afford this, let's cut Social Security. Because that's a dedicated, funded program that we all pay into. It's the exact same thing with the paid family leave program at the state level. This is a dedicated funded program that we do have funded, and it's not part of the budget that we are all talking about. So to combine those two and say we can't afford that, that's simply not the case because it's a dedicated funding source. I will also add one last thing. During this debate when we were passing this in 23, the Republicans, I think rightfully so, said, look, we're hearing all these advocates and experts come to the table and say, this is how much funding we need for this program. We want an outside entity to verify for us what the funding needs are of this program. And me and a couple of other Democrats said, that seems pretty smart. Let's have an outside entity evaluate this program. They evaluated it. We increased it just a little bit to make up for what that study said, and we're following those guidelines just like the Republicans asked us to do. So this program is funded. We're ready to launch in January, and people's lives are going to be transformed in Minnesota, small businesses to large businesses. I think young people, we were talking about getting more people in northern Minnesota. This is part of how you do it. You make sure that people's livelihoods are looked out for, and regardless if they work at a mine or at Medtronic down in the cities, they have paid family medical leave.
Thanks, Grant. All right, this really is.
I disagree. I disagree vehemently.
Thank you, Roger.
It is not paid for.
I'm going to give you about a minute
No.
to you
I
can
don't know.
you can.
No, it's fine.
Okay,
Just-
our conversation afterwards.
Yeah.
I know somebody who works for the paper, so
Yep.
we could write it out. Now I just want to give you each 1 minute to just briefly, if I missed something, if we didn't get to some of the questions that you think are important, go ahead, Roger, if there's another issue at hand that you want to speak to.
No, I'm just one. Yeah, but this.
So
This. That's okay.
I don't know if anyone here is aware that we have several hundred people here, and most of you turned in questions. If you have additional questions that we didn't screen anything out for any reason of controversy. It's a bit of a struggle to have people writing stuff down and have one person over in a dark corner just sort of sorting that out. So if you'd like to follow up with me afterwards, I actually have the phone numbers for all of these people, and I will call them and ask them your question and put it in the paper. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lake County Press.
Thank you.
Thank you if you already do. We really appreciate it.
Could I please just say a different thing, please? First of all, thank you. My
Yeah.
God, thank you. This is what democracy looks like. And if there are questions that didn't get asked, let's keep asking these people when we can.
Yeah.
They're here.
Yeah.
But the three of you, all of you, why don't you write a letter together or send a damn email together or send text messages to Peter Stalber and tell him, Peter, it's time to come home.
Yeah.
And here's our people. But you want to speak.
So,
You want peace.
It's.
can somebody tell me what time it is? All right, I have 2 minutes to wrap, and then I have another gig after this. It's called My Family, and I'm sure you guys can all appreciate that. Any last comments?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I just really quick.
Sure.
In the lobby over this way when you leave, there's shirts for sale that help an organization in the school. Please support them.
Thanks, Roger.
Yes.
Thank you.
We were here an hour and a half and didn't talk at all about childcare. So I've been working very hard. Families are struggling. And so I wrote a bill to allow we've lost 50% of our family childcare. Two Harbors has one center. That's it. And so we need childcare. I've been working very hard. I wrote 2 bills. I think they'll have a chance to get passed this year to allow family childcare provider to have 2 of their own kids exempted in the ratio, so that we keep the infant and toddler ratios the same, but they could add a 3, 4, or 5-year-old or before and after school kids. Most people that go into family child care want to stay home with their kids, and then it just becomes a love, and the community knows who they are. And Greater Minnesota has always had family child care. I could have never ran Sunrise Nursing Home without it. I dropped my kids off on Lakewood Road. So I've been working on that. working on centers, trying to keep them stable, because if you don't have childcare, you cannot have a job. So if you're working and trying to coordinate that, so that's a huge thing. The other thing I'll say is schools. I mean, we had historic investment in public education, and we have the most historic cuts we've ever seen. We have millions of dollars in layoffs and teachers losing their jobs in Minnesota, and that's, to me, terrible. We have a governor who's a teacher. We had $18 billion with a B, just 2 years ago, and that money was spent, and we're now. And we haven't changed anything with our reading scores, our math scores, our science scores. We need to lead the way in Minnesota, and I've been working very hard in getting the trades back to make sure the trades have funding, getting school funding for Lakeview, for nurse CNA classes, to make sure we have the trades, to make sure we have as much funding for the trades as we possibly can, so kids have pathways, not just a 4-year degree, but they have a 2-year degree and they have the trades. And making sure that happens, and we did a lot with pensions. Republicans have been leading the way to get Tier 2 teachers' pensions. Danny Nadeau did a fantastic job. There was an article on him, and we wrote several bills. And I think Tier 2 teachers are going to get something done. I think there's a great chance for it this year. Also helping retired police who want to come back at 55 with their pension reform. So we've been doing a lot of things that we didn't talk about because we didn't have time, but I think it's exciting because I get a lot of emails from teachers and educators. I get a lot of emails from people that are frustrated with their pensions and retirement pensions. So we're trying to work on that and to let people come back into the workforce if they retired at 55 and they want to come help, to not be punished with their pensions. So it's good news.
Thank you, Natalie. And Grant, last words.
Well, thanks so much, Kitty, and thanks so much, everybody, for being here. I feel really lucky to represent you all in the state Senate. We live in, I would argue, the most beautiful place in Minnesota, probably in the country. And I think that's really important, right, that we be prideful in the place that we live. Unfortunately, what I also see is a lot of the disparities that we face in rural and greater Minnesota. Whether it's our rural ambulance, where local property owners are being asked to take on the costs for rural ambulance, meanwhile the suburbs are provided by private hospitals. Whether it's education, where we can't make it so that seasonal cabin owners pay into our local schools like the Lake Superior School District. Whether it's the transportation costs that go into many of the things that we rely on, right? All of those additional distances that we have to go. Small businesses trying to get started up with lack of workforce, lack of childcare, like Natalie talked about. There are so many unique challenges that we have in greater Minnesota. And I will tell you that I am the last DFLer that represents a purely rural district. So I often find myself in a caucus working with individuals who are focused on urban and suburban problems. And that's okay. It's okay that we focus on all the issues that Minnesotans have, but I want to let you know that I am bringing our voice to the state capitol. I was elected an assistant majority leader because I think people saw that we needed to make sure that this voice was at the table, and I'm going to keep fighting for our region, whether it's against my party or it's against the other party, because I firmly believe in Northland first, and we're going to keep delivering for you all as long as I'm in the state Senate, and I think these guys as well. So thank you guys so much. Really appreciate
Thank you guys for being here. I'm serious. Let's give them a hand. Really appreciate that they showed up and listened to you today. Thank you so much. If you have more questions that we didn't get to and you want me to find out what they are, come and see me. We'll get answers, and I'll put them in the paper. Then you have to buy it, and that would be good. Thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.